Hi, and welcome to the Soul and Survival podcast with Grant and Louise Bentley. We have run the Victorian College of Classical Homeopathy since 1995. We are both qualified practicing homeopaths, and Grant is also a naturopath. Together, we discovered a link between energy and facial structure based on traditional ideas from homeopathy that have roots going back 200 years. This project is called Homeopathic Facial Analysis, or HFA for short, and has been the cornerstone of clinical diagnosis and training courses since 1999. Between us, we have written and produced 7 HFA books, including Soul and Survival. Soul and Survival is the philosophy of energy influencing matter and how this energy forms individual facial structure, our unconscious drives and fears, our life patterns, and universal time cycles.
Okay, welcome everybody, and welcome Louise to this next Soul and Survival podcast.
Hi Grant, nice to be back. We've had a little tiny break, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. It's been we did Christmas and then New Year, and then about half of our family's birthdays, including your own, are in January. Hopefully I haven't made a mistake and this is meant to be December or something like that. But and then we did Australia Day. Not that that's...
Doesn't mean much if you're not in Australia.
Doesn't mean much if you're not in Australia. But yeah, so January's a reasonably busy month.
It is. So New Year 2025. Lots going on. We actually have done some recordings already since Christmas, but feel like we've just had a little break recently. Anyway, here we are today, and I said to you before, what would you like to talk about? And you said, I don't know, just ask me a question, any question, let's see where it goes. So, all right. I said it's going to be a bit positive, and I've got to say it's very hot where we are today.
It has been very hot.
Yeah.
Actually, it's been a pretty traditional summer really for us.
That's true.
The last couple of summers pre this seem to be a little cooler.
Yeah.
Although we keep getting told that we're boiling, but I mean it seemed to be a bit cooler. But this summer has been a very traditional, what I remember as a traditional sort of summer, which is in the 30s. A lot of the time, which I guess for the Americans was kind of early to mid 90s, I think.
Yeah, well, I don't know what 100 is, but it's about, 38, is
100 is about 38,
38,
I think.
yeah. Well, so we're running around 35, 36 and sometimes over, so it's getting up there. It's a bit draining. Where we are, the weather changes quite a lot, so you never quite get used to a single weather and kind of get in sync with it. It's quite changeable and can go quite cold quickly and then up it goes again. And it's
not that cold. It hasn't been that cold.
I don't know. The other night it was right down and we're putting on jumpers and we're like, oh, this is weird. Anyway, here it is. It's a bit hot, so we might feel a little blah today, but hopefully not too blah. Okay, it's on a hot day when you're feeling a bit tired. Here's a big question for you, something to think about. What has been the most empowering moment of your homeopathic career?
Oh, crumbs, I don't know.
I knew you were going to say that.
Well, there hasn't been a moment, that's why. Now, I think when you get a result that is really staggering, that's the empowering moment. And I'm thankful to say that I've had a lot of really empowering moments. But any one in particular, that I don't know. And it's a funny thing because, you stay in this for a while and you build up a reputation and then people join because of that reputation, and I can understand that. I mean, you want to, if you're having surgery, you'd always want to go to what you considered to be a top surgeon. You don't want anyone shaking and, being in the top 100. You want in the top 10 if you're, for whatever practitioner you go to. So we're very busy And part of that busyness means that I don't remember the details of these pivotal moments like what you're talking about.
So you're saying the most, I actually use the word empowering.
Or empowering.
Pivotal, empowering, similar.
Well, an empowering moment to me is when you get a really, really fantastic result. Now, a lot of results, I'm thankful to say, are really good results. But every now and again, you get one that's just a miracle. And a miracle will happen in around about 1 in 30 or so. And what I mean by a miracle is when a person, within a matter of a couple of weeks, goes from 10 runs down the ladder to right up the top.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
It is amazing, but it only happens in about 1 in 30. Why it doesn't happen with everybody, I don't know. But
to that degree.
To that degree, or in that manner. Most people...
It's a slow, steady...
I can honestly say, hand on heart, that do get a degree of improvement from a reasonable to really good. Right? Now, some of that, though, will depend on your starting point. Right? So if you have a neurotypical kid who is in the midst of a PANDAS flare and is now, some people refer to it as the exorcist disease because it sort of changes a person's character while they're in this flare to such a degree that the original kid's almost unrecognisable. And when you've got that neurotypical start, you can get back there really quickly, or relatively quickly.
When you say back there, what do you mean?
Back to that neurotypical state without the flare. You can bring them out of the flare. You can cut down on a lot of the OCDs. You can cut down on a lot of the tics. You can cut down on a lot of these fears and obsessions and delusions. And you can get them back to a neurotypical state. The harder ones are when there is a PANDAS diagnosis over a severe autism diagnosis. Because it's just...
So like two complex states overlaying one another.
Yeah, and it's there was never any neurotypical behaviour. It was, and so it's always very hard. And this is where, and I have written this in books before, but it's a savage thing to say because parents don't want to hear it. They want a glimmer of hope for these autistic kids that maybe this autism might be modified in some way. And some of the sharp edges of behaviour can be if they're extremely violent or they're picking at their skin or, so there are some real sharp edges that homeopathy can take off. But some people come in with the hope, as any parent would, that there's some way that we're going to un-autism this child.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? Because you've also got the situation where the labels are becoming more and more broad in their application. So some kids with a label can be improved while others not so much. But I know what you're talking about. That standard PANDAS is like they were typically normal for, in their own individual way. They were normal and then they've gone into some aberrant state. And you're saying with the homeopathy, you can really see incredible shifts. But if their starting point is on the lowish side and always sort of has been for a long, long time, possibly since birth, then, getting them back to that state from a worse state possibly there, but it's harder.
Look, and one of the real problems with the diagnosis of autism is that, so we've gone from a very optimistic to
I know.
suddenly it's not
It's
so
taken
optimistic.
a turn.
But one of the problems with autism is the diagnosis itself, because it is such a broad net. Now, they are starting to bring in different stages and so on, but it is such a broad net that really can stretch from quirky and maybe a little introspective behaviour all the way up to what we used to term a retardation. And, you know, so when people say to me that my child's been diagnosed with autism, the first thing that I have to do is that I have to get them to explain where on this spectrum they are, because it really does make a really big difference as to what your objectives are and what you're hoping that you can achieve. For those autistic cases that are really deep in that retardation sort of area, we can modify we can make some health benefits in the sense that, a bit like with Down syndrome, you know, we can stop some of these kids from getting it because they're really prone to colds and congestion and, you know, all those sort of mucousy sort of things. Or they can be quite prone to digestive problems, and we can help there. But, you know, you're never going to undowns anybody.
So you're basically saying where there's health issues and you can strengthen the health, but where there's damage in the brain, the limitations are much more than somebody who goes in and out of phases with inflammation.
Well, when they're born like that, yeah. I mean, and one of the problems is that you don't always know, because as babies, of course, you can't pick it up. You can't pick it up till around about 18 months, 2 years of age and so on. And so then you realise that, you know, perhaps this child's not learning or making contact the way that they should. And even then, it can fool you with a regressive autism where somebody can be learning ultra quickly until they're 2 and 2.5, and then suddenly, bang, they go backwards.
Do you have any thoughts on that? Why that age can affect some children? It just seems bizarre to imagine that you are progressing. And I know it's blamed on all sorts of things, and maybe some of those are
Well, the most
real,
common one that it's blamed on is the vaccination.
Yeah.
And there is evidence there to suggest it. There's a lot of people that do make that link between
the parent,
particularly MMR and but I don't look there. Sometimes, you know, their stats are pretty impressive, but I'm not prepared to turn around and say no, that's the cause, because I'll tell you why. In alternative therapies, one of the things that your average GP doesn't encounter a lot are counterculture or alternate parents.
yeah,
Right? So, because they have a tendency to stay away a little bit, right?
Of course.
So they go. So this is why I'm not prepared to say, okay, vaccination is the issue in every case or broad blanket, because I've got parents that had a problem with, say, child 1, never vaccinated child 2 or 3, and child 2 and 3 end up in a worse state than child 1, or never vaccinated full stop and yet still ended up with an autistic child. But in saying that, I have also seen parents who are really credible, and I hate this idea with a passion, by the way, the way that medicine writes these parents off as if for some reason they're reaching illogical conclusions based on timing, but, almost this condescending pat on the head. If you knew better, you wouldn't be making these conclusions. But I know parents that they will swear black and blue that their child, the lights went out almost as that serum was going in. And when you listen to these parents talk, you know what it's like. If somebody is really delusional or somebody is really eccentric or crackers and out there, it doesn't take much of a conversation before your senses start going on red alert, right? You know it.
Yeah.
But you also know that when a person is grounded, and I'm telling you now, I don't care what the stats say, I'm telling you that many of these parents are really grounded, smart people. And when they say that those lights went out that day or the next day or that minute, then after talking to them for 30 minutes about this, or talking to them for a little bit longer and asking a series of questions and listening to their answers, I absolutely believe them.
And why shouldn't you? There is such a thing as cause and effect. And if there has been a different cause and then there's an obvious effect, it is reasonable with a scientific mind to put two and two together. Now, you can't prove it unless you've got a control group and a whole lot of things.
I think this is a big outer, you know. Honestly, I think this term anecdotal, I reckon it's a skirt to hide behind.
Right.
Yeah. Why shouldn't it count?
Well,
because if you have thousands of cases of anecdotes, why doesn't that count?
Oh, I guess under the scientific paradigm, and I don't claim to be trained in science, but I sort of understand the consistency of it and the comparison to the control and so forth. But I don't get the impression there's any control work done in this particular area. So you really only have the anecdote. And in the end, that child's being brought to you clinically for some help, and you do the best you can, and you're hearing their story and saying, okay, this could be part of it. But I guess what I'm hearing you saying, and I know you say this to me outside of a podcast environment, is there are different stresses for different children that can still have the same outcome. It's not an exclusive stress, but sometimes it's hard to find the stress. Sometimes, like I've been looking at a few cases like this myself recently, and you're always looking for patterns. It's part of what we do, and I find it interesting that it's quite common that the child had what would be called, say, a quirky personality, right? So like they seemingly, like there's something about their personality that's a little more susceptible to then a stress. So when you put, 1 + 1, quirky personality plus stress, seems to be that's enough to elicit an extreme response that might mean their nervous system, their emotions, maybe even their intellect is quite challenged, and the symptoms show, and then they're given a label.
Well, I think that's absolutely spot on when it comes to PANDAS, to be honest.
Yeah.
There's very few kids that I treat that even when we get them out of a flare, they were and remain a little quirky.
Individual.
Now, define quirky, I suppose. But, if you've got a quirky child, you know what I mean by quirky. Even if but you can't define it because the quirk manifests in so many different ways.
Individuality?
It is. It's an individual eccentricity. It's just what they used to call in the old term ways, right?
Yeah.
It's just their way.
And you could argue that's kind of a positive thing. I mean, isn't diversity the strength of humanity, the strength of nature?
Time.
Well, this is the thing. Like I've heard people talk, and I know I'm jumping topic here, but it's just in my head. about the education system, particularly in the Western world, being really rigid. And despite all the efforts to, bring in individualism and so forth, its underpinning structure is that of rigidity, moving forward at the same pace, at the same time, at the same age, with the same topics. And that doesn't really allow for individuality. So if you happen to be less compromising in your character, which is what you would probably say a quirky person is, then you're going to be sort of highlighted as not going into that streamlined approach, which is kind of a factory approach, really, isn't it?
It is. I mean, things like individuality and quirkiness and individual eccentricities. I know we keep getting told about individuality and immersing it into the greater good for the greater number, and
but only if you don't rock the boat.
It's word salad, man. It's in practical reality, it's just meaningless sophistry.
Okay.
Because it isn't. Because if you take anybody that with any kind of, any sort of thinking or behaviour that isn't mainstream, and they're virtually medicated into oblivion to make sure that they are mainstream by a whole medical system that, quote unquote, values diversity. Now, this is just, it's nonsense.
There's a real hypocrisy in there, and you do see that, don't you? And clearly...
And boys are the worst, by the way.
Yeah, boys are having a hard time.
Boys are having a really hard time. Because, we as a gender are not meant to sit down in a classroom for 8 hours. You could not, if you were God, you could not come up with a more boring atmosphere and environment than the classroom, right? And if you're a boy, and particularly on a modern diet, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a boy who's wriggly, one-dimensional, because a lot of boys are, they're just one-dimensional, they focus on one thing, and they put all of their effort into one thing. They are not generalists like females. All right, so boys will put all of their interest into a couple of areas and show annoyingly to the mother, annoyingly little interest to anything other than those couple of areas. Then they're designed to move constantly. And so now what we're going to do is fill them full of Coke and hamburgers and pizza and, all of these sort of junky sort of snacks, and sit them down and tell them to be quiet and sit still.
You can see there's a problem there.
Yeah, and if you don't, well, then we'll medicate you because there's clearly a problem. Well, there's clearly a problem because that boy is thousands and thousands and thousands of years of evolution. So when we became, if you look at the agricultural revolution and you're talking about owning a farm, a small plot of land that you've got to work, and suddenly you have a son that can virtually do half of what you can do by the age of 7 or 8 and all that you can do by about 12 or 13 and not tire, well, that kid's a bonus.
He's a gold mine.
He's a gold mine.
Yeah.
But now you take that same boy and you stick him in a classroom and you've got a problem. But I guess it's a problem you can't get around because we're not going back to the farm.
No.
Right?
We're in a modern
it's a real
society.
problem.
So do you ever see any parents that have come up with solutions? I know a lot of them do homeschooling and this sort of thing. Do you I know you talk to so many families. Do you see some of them coming up with really good ways of managing that boy energy? And I don't mean to sound sexist because I know some girls have it too, but generally speaking, you'll see those types of behaviours more in boys, sometimes in the girls too, but girls seem to be able to sit for longer and do rote work. And I mean, it's just part of our biology to some degree.
I don't think you do need to apologise for sort of saying the boys. You're right. I mean, there are girls in this category. We're not talking exclusively here, and anyone with a daughter with PANDAS knows how fidgety and how bad their concentration can be. But a lot of these kids are boys. And particularly when they're just getting ADHD diagnoses. And they might not even have the whole PANDAS catastrophe at all. But that'll be part of it. Part of it's because they're a boy. They're being medicated because they're a boy.
So do you see some parents coming up with practical ways of enhancing their child's life, given that we live in a corporate world, a world of factory, a world of products that come out, exactly the same, et cetera, et cetera?
Okay, here's the advice, take it or leave it, that I give most people. Now, whether they take it on board or not, I have absolutely no idea. And understanding that, I'm no Jordan Peterson here. I'm not a behavioural or social clinical psychologist. These are just things that people tell me over the last 30 years.
I was going to say, you've been in clinic 30 years. You're a parent, you're a grandparent. You've observed girls, you've observed boys. We have, amongst our family alone, an enormous diversity of behaviours and character, as every family does.
You learn from patients too, because they try things.
Yeah.
Right? And as you know, I mean, I'm a pretty pragmatic sort of person, which is why I'm in clinic. And clinic only has one objective, and that's to make that patient better, or at least better than what they are.
Yep.
Right? So it only has that one objective. If you don't do that, then you've failed. And I'm a pretty pragmatic person, and I don't like failing very much. And so when you're got a boy that is kind of really restless, and I'm not talking about crazy restless, I'm just talking about, nothing that's part of a really strong pathology, mental pathology, but somebody who is just a bit more restless, they can't concentrate, and there are things that you can do. One, don't give them sugar, mate.
Yeah.
Right? Sugar is a substance that almost acts like a drug. Well, not almost. It acts like a drug on the nervous system. It not only heightens the nervous system so it's buzzing at 1,000,000 miles an hour, which is a bad thing if you're already a little hyperactive, but it also creates an intense inflammatory response, which is in turn going to be perceived by the brain as if there is something wrong in the body, which will send the immune system and the nervous system into red alert. And that can, if it goes on for too long, that's exactly what PANDAS is. I dumb everything down. Now, that might say a lot about me, but I dumb everything down to its most basic. And if you're talking about PANDAS, you're talking about a kid that's in a state of fight or flight. That's it. Everything else is just all of the mycobacteria, the plasmas, the everything else that goes along. They're all tourists. The main problem is that you're in a state of fight or flight. And why all these other opportunistic moulds and diseases are being found in the tests is because your immune system is chaotic and doesn't know how to address the problem because it's too busy being on red alert to do its job properly. Right? So when you calm that down, a lot of these tests will start to show positives. Essentially what you're doing is you're getting a lot of false positives. Now, a lot of MDs are going to just start throwing their whatever is in their hand at the radio at the moment, or throw their phone in the bin and swear never to listen to this guy again because he doesn't know what he's talking about. But that's how I see it, right? So if you are, all right, let me do an analogy. If you go into a hotel and you know how they have the instructions for if there is a fire on the back of the door, what's the very first thing that it says?
Oh.
All right, I'll tell you what I'll do.
I haven't
I'll
looked
give
at
you
those
a,
instructions. I'm sorry.
I'll give you a hint.
Do not panic or something.
Do not panic.
Yeah, oh, cool. Woohoo. I feel like I should get a gold star for that.
Okay, so why does it say don't panic?
Because you've got to think clearly when there's an emergency. It's your best chance of surviving it.
That's right. That's exactly right.
If you panic, you're almost certainly going to do something stupid.
You're going to make dumb decisions.
Yeah.
Right? So what happens if your immune system's in a state of panic?
It's making silly decisions. And you will be getting an array of false positives. No matter how much you test, you're gonna walk away from that doctor or functional medicine doctor or naturopath or whatever it is that you're going to, thinking, how does this kid survive? With all these problems.
Because you have a toilet paper roll of everything that they're allergic to and all of these different creepy crawlies that are in their blood, and you just think to yourself, this is a lifelong expensive mission to get rid of this one by one. And it is. But you don't know. Here's the thing, and here's where the other half that didn't throw their phone away are going to throw it away now. Because you don't know whether that's true or not true. You don't know whether those tests are true or not true yet. They might be, but it also could be a false positive reading by a very stressed immune system.
Yep.
And I've seen this. I've seen where you calm people down to such a degree that, and then it takes a few months afterwards for their body to properly settle. But then afterwards, all of these blood tests start dropping away.
Yeah. It's interesting about the delayed response too, isn't it?
Yeah. Because you need time to settle and you need time to readdress. Right? So now...
Because the remedy is like teaching the body what it should do, right?
It's putting it back into balance. And now what it's got to do is retrain itself for a calm state because it's so used to a stressed state.
Yeah. So we're adapting all the time, even to our own erroneous perceptions. We're always adapting our bodies, our mind, our emotion, nervous system and everything. It's just the hormones, they're adapting, and then we're giving a message to get them to see the world through calm eyes because, as you've said, we're not meant to have a huge survival panic response unless there's something a real emergency.
Yeah.
And then, even then, you better not to have a panicked response.
No. But it's an acute response. It's never meant to be chronic.
Yeah. You get the fright, so you move in the right direction. But after you've had the fright, you're meant to move in the right direction, calm down, reassess, learn something from them, reestablish balance, and move on.
Well, and the other thing also too is that if you are in a real state of danger, then you are going through a state of fight or flight. I mean, in actuality, you are fighting. Or you are running or climbing a tree. Now that kind of feedback system of the musculature tells the rest of the body that it can relax now. Once it's up the tree and the lion's gone, your breathing starts to settle, the lactic acid starts to disperse, and all of the things that your brain's going to interpret as danger over have taken place. But the problem when you're dealing with PANDAS or any other chronic disease which has chronic inflammation as its foundation is that the stressor isn't stopping. You're not going back into place. And And so we need to be able to reduce the stressors as much as possible. Now, one of the easiest ways, which is a really scenic tour of coming back to your original question of what parents can do, don't give sugar.
And can you just clarify what sugar is? Is it just the white powdery stuff?
Well, if you can't do the whole thing, because sometimes some kids are in such a state of fight or flight that a parent may not be in a position or strong enough to do the war that is going to come from withdrawing all sugar. Because essentially all sugar starts with anything that started with a plant.
Yeah.
Anything. So breads, pastas, vegetables, fruits, anything that's made from that, beer if you're an adult, wine if you're an adult, they all started with grapes and hops. And so anything that starts with a plant ends in sugar. That's it, full stop. But if you can't fight the war, sometimes you have to fight the battle. Now, the first battle is the white powdery stuff.
Which is the fast sugar. That's the one that hits you like
it's the confectionery. Yeah. So you've got to, that's number one. That has to go. And there are no sugar confectionery options, to which now, if there were any naturopaths listening, they're now not, because they're really against a lot of the aspartames and so on. But you don't have to do aspartame or aspartame, I think the Americans pronounce it. You've got monk fruit and all that. But I'll tell you what, even with the aspartame, when you're in a PANDAS flea, you're better off with aspartame. You are.
Than sugar. Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think of it, and I know there's no scientific background to this, but I think of the food as being really fast, literally fast food that hits your body fast, it's processed fast, it creates, bad digestion, and maybe your bowels aren't right. Everything's just hitting it like really intensely. Or you can do slow food that just takes its time. It's got nutrition in it. It gradually absorbs into the system. It has time to digest properly. It has time to evacuate properly. And it does seem that the animal food is the slow rebuilding nutrient food, and the plants are there as a little backup for some micronutrients, but they really hit the gut hard, and the more processed they are, the harder they hit. Obviously, vegetables are a slower form. There's slower forms within each category, but it is interesting, isn't it?
Look, I'm not full on low carb. Like, I'm not carnivore.
No.
And I don't believe that fruit and vegetables are bad for you as such. But they shouldn't form the basis of your diet either. There's enough evidence out there. And particularly if you're talking about anyone with any inflammatory condition, that inflammation has to come down as quickly as it can. And the biggest antagonist to it not coming down is sugar.
Yeah, so you're saying that's something to be removed, reduced enormously. Are there any other things that are positive that you've noticed parents doing that are really helpful to these children that need to move more, need to be outside more, etc.?
Yeah, like what we just said, you're going to either fight that person or tiger or whatever off, or you're going to climb up a tree and hope they get bored and go away. Either way, you've done a massive amount of exertion.
Exercise.
Oh, yeah. It's really important. It burns. They have to be involved in some sort of sport, which is now problem number 2, because they never want to. They always want to. When you're in that inflammatory state, you just don't. You
get sluggish.
You don't want to leave the house. A lot of the time you have too many fears and anxieties to leave the house. They're too busy sort of, what happens if they look at me? What happens if my look's not right? What happens if something goes wrong? What happens if I join a team and someone feels sick? What happens if I see I had a patient that was really right up there as far as, professionalism goes. The whole career was gone because they became very inflamed. And so it can hit you at any age. We're not just talking about little kids here. And they developed just such a fear of other people's nausea and vomiting that when they were training so hard and I'm not going to go into what sport or clearly not who, but one of the teammates, it was hot, they pushed, and this one teammate vomited while they were doing laps. Well, that was the end of their career because they had such a fear of vomiting themselves that even someone else vomiting might be contagious, even though their brain's saying, I know it's not contagious because I know why they're throwing up. But that doesn't matter. Once your brain's inflamed, it's totally irrational. And you can sit down there and say the most rational things and people will agree with you, but they won't do it.
Yeah.
It's just too strong. So that would be number 2, and then we'll finish on number 3.
Yep.
The number 3 thing that you can do, because, if we go back to our chased through the jungle scenario, you don't want to add more adrenaline. No, because your adrenaline levels are already high. So many of these PANDAS people have the dark circles under the eyes, all this kind of stuff. This is all showing a little bit of adrenal exhaustion, not clinical adrenal exhaustion, but this is one of the interesting areas where, if you're going into conventional medicine, you're either sick by pathological standards, or there's nothing wrong with you. There's kind of like no in between. Whereas with alternative medicine that you can have organs that are tired or stressed, and you're getting signs and symptoms that are in relation to that stressed organ, without having blood tests that show that there's actually a pathological problem.
And that's interesting, and maybe we should talk about that next time. It makes me think of this incredibly important thing, the difference between the diagnosis and the symptoms.
All right, well, let's do it next time.
Okay.
But anyway, where I was going to go was don't be careful of the really sort of stressful video games.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Because they just create a whole lot of adrenaline.
But also an addiction. So you're talking about...
Well, you get addicted to the adrenaline. Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah. We get addicted to hormones.
And addicted to sugar.
So
2 out of the 3 are highly addictive, so it's hard to remove them, but you need to.
They've done tests where the centres of the brain that get highlighted by sugar are exactly the same as those with cocaine.
Yeah.
So you can't say one's addictive and the other isn't. Or, that the one's okay and the other isn't. I mean, they're both...
I think you can if it's part of our whole food system, and that's the problem.
And if you're an adult, don't take cocaine. There you go. There's
good advice.
There's
very good advice. Okay, thanks, Grant.
All right, see you, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Soul and Survival. If you are interested in more information, books, courses, consultations, learning more about facial analysis or life themes, please visit our college site, Victorian College of Classical Homeopathy, vcch.org.